Welcome back, everybody, to me being mildly annoyed by the Wheel of Time. And today we'll continue to, stroll through the Gathering Storm. Spoiler, it's not exactly gathering that much so far. Anyway, we're going to talk about chapters 10 to 19, which is all about, stuff, but nothing really happening so far, although they're, small bits and pieces, and we'll talk about all of them, right? All right, let's do that. Well, cheers. All right, so we continue to spend most of our time either around Tar Valon, in the what I will call the Egwene plotline, or in somewhere in Aridoman around the Rand plotline. We get some small glimpses of other people here and there, but they're always connected to those two plot lines, and nothing much going on with Matt, Nynaeve, Perrin, and so forth. And I feel that's one of the, things that Brandon Sanderson, being the kind of writer that he is, one of the choices that he made is to split the book, or the next volumes, not so much by, chronologically, but by characters that we talk about. And it's one of those things that, George R. R. Martin decided to do with the last two books of A Song of Ice and Fire that we got so far, when he split, well, he even split geographically back then, but, to actually, concentrate on one or two characters, and then tell the next part of the plot in probably the next book. I assume we'll get some of that. Or it'll just, drop by. But right now, I'm hoping and thinking, because I do have views on the things that Brandon Sanderson does, and it feels like him just, figuring it's easier to tell the story if you concentrate on two main plots, and then concentrate on the next two main plots, and so forth, which makes it easier. And I think that's a good point to start today, because obviously I'm still thinking about what Brandon Sanderson brings to the Wheel of Time, what his influence is, what Robert Jordan still has to say about these books. And yes, we've spoken about it yesterday, right? There's people that say, there's notes for some plot lines, and sometimes only a few paragraphs for a scene or whatever. And I get it. See, here's the thing. Brandon Sanderson, from what I have read, and that is, I'll be frank, it's the first three Mistborn, the Mistborn trilogy, Era 1 trilogy, and it is the Alloy of Law, and that's all I've read. I own more of them, but I just never got into reading them so far. It will certainly happen at some point. I might even, I said I'll read Stormlight once he actually finishes, the next one or so. So I have enough to get into, because I can't be bothered to reread them every time a new one comes out. I know he's much faster than someone like George R. R. Martin, but, we'll see. I will probably read it at some point, and then you'll hear all about it, I guess. But here's the thing. Brandon Sanderson, from where I'm standing so far, is what I would call a craftsman. He's a craftsman and not an artist. And that may sound more, harsh, may sound harsher than it is meant in this regard. It's one of the reasons why I feel that Sanderson is the perfect choice for what Robert Jordan does, because while he's maybe not, as he claims, adopting Robert Jordan's writing style, he's certainly able to understand his writing style and use bits and pieces and make sure that his writing is not diverging too far from it, right? He's not going all Gene Wolfe in it, is what I'm trying to say here. So that's certainly one of the things. The other thing is that Brandon Sanderson is a very efficient writer. By which I mean he makes sure that all of his stuff is easy to read. You get all the information. There's very little, chance of the reader not getting something that the writer wants to bring across. And that's a choice. I'm not saying it's good or bad. It's not exactly the choice that I personally, it's not exactly the thing that I personally prefer when reading books, because a Brandon Sanderson book leaves very little to, your own interpretation. He makes sure that you get every message that you want to get. And while Robert Jordan is sort of on in a similar, around in a similar way. He's not as strict about it as Brandon Sanderson. Brandon Sanderson's writing is extremely streamlined to, make that also work. Reading a Sanderson novel is extremely easy. I'm not claiming that, those first 11 Wheel of Time books were hard reads. Far from it. I could probably just blaze through one in a day and not worry about it. At least the shorter ones that don't take that much time. But, it doesn't, require me to make a break after like a chapter and think deeply about what I've done, or go back and reread bits and pieces because the prose is complicated or whatever. Those are easy reads, all of them. But The Gathering Storm so far is even easier. It's much easier. It's so streamlined, and that's certainly mostly due to Brandon Sanderson taking over. His prose is streamlined. His sentences are even, less convoluted than the ones that Robert Jordan used. I know we spoke about that when we spoke about the first chapters in Eye of the World, where I pointed out that there are parallels to the pulp style, the Robert E. Howard pulp style of writing fiction in the descriptions and all of that. And Brandon Sanderson has cut down on that a lot. He has further streamlined. There's sentences are short, to the point, have like one or two adjectives in it, and that's about it. And he makes sure that he repeats the more important information, and he spells it out as clearly as possible. It is, if anything, even less lyrical than the things that Robert Jordan did. You look at it, and while I often complained about it, Robert Jordan tried to do humor from time to time. It didn't work with me, but humor is a very personal thing, so yeah, it just didn't work with me. But there is a certain level of irony sometimes with some of the parts that Jordan wrote. There's a certain playfulness there. As I said, it didn't always land with me. Most of the time it didn't land with me. But that's more like my personal taste and so forth. But Robert Jordan made those attempts. There are bits and pieces that feel like he's trying to, play with rhythm and flow of language and go it a bit more lyrical or whatever. Those are gone from what Brandon Sanderson writes. This is very serviceable, straightforward, effective, efficient, streamlined prose, which makes it even easier to read this. This just flows by, and you're like, yeah, fine. And then I looked at another things, one of the complaints that I said yesterday, and I think it's a very important part of why this is so easy to read. Nothing much happens. Nothing much happens at all. But which, I mean, it's not like you have to read a chapter or reread it because there's suddenly 10 things happening in one chapter or so. No, there's nothing happening, and the thoughts and ideas of the characters are spelled out so directly that you can pick it up while doing whatever at the same time. And as I said, nothing much happens. I'm 40% into this book, and literally, you could probably sum all of that up in 2 chapters if you really wish to. 2 convoluted chapters, 2 complicated, dense chapters, yes. But it is possible because we don't get that much in there. But what we get, and this is a trick that Brandon Sanderson, I feel, is very good at. If you let yourself, be roped in by his even more tell, don't show kind of approach. And that is to create a sense of false urgency. That's what we get with this book so far. It's called The Gathering Storm. So you expect something will happen. And in almost every chapter, someone will say that Tarmangaiden, the final battle, is very close and we need to do something. But that's all they do. Very little actually happens. So we have that sense of a narrative rushing forward, because that's what everyone tells us as readers. But it doesn't actually, it's not actually borne out by the events in those narratives, which is a clever trick to do if you want to do that. And I feel it once again, it lends itself to what you do with The Wheel of Time, because Robert Jordan also is very much about telling us things, how the world is, how things are, that then are not necessarily borne out by the actual events and the world that he's portraying in his books. So Sanderson leans into that to create that feeling that you're on this like onrushing train, and it's heading towards the final battle, but it won't come for another 2 books, I feel. And I don't think that much more will happen in here, I guess. And, I feel like another aspect of why this works is that one of the big things of Robert Jordan's whole world building is miscommunication, right? He relies heavily on it. I do think that it is partly what he wants to do, because as twisted as it is, I feel Robert Jordan's approach is very much about men and women need to work together, and there needs to be communication between the genders. That's what Robert Jordan wants to show us. He goes about it in a very wrong way, because he still kind of comes from a patriarchal background, and kind of believes that it has to be men who lead at the end of the day and all of that stuff. And I know he says otherwise, but that's how the narrative, like what the narrative bears out, right? While he does all of that, it is very much, a lot of these stories are very much about people not talking to each other, withholding information, and thus leading to more, delays, more problems in the long run. And, that makes Brandon Sanderson's work here so easy, because he can just like slowly gather in some of those miscommunications and reveal shit and give us the feeling that great things are afoot, that were there for the reader to know all the while, right? Case in point, there is that scene where Min tells Rand that that he has to break the seals on the Dark One's prison before they can imprison him again. And yeah, that knowledge was in the books, and we knew all of that as readers. We have known that for at least 5 or 6 books. But because we're so used to Robert Jordan not, getting to the point, now it feels like there's a big thing happening in the story, because someone finally spoke those words to another person, even though everyone kind of already knew it. And that creates the sense, or the false sense, of actually things happening, even though it's more like finally saying things explicitly that were always implied and always in there. Now, will Rand actually act on the whole thing? I doubt it. Not this book. Maybe next book. Next one's called Towers of Midnight. That sounds like a book in which maybe someone will finally break those seals so we can get like a final battle in book 14. But I'm still careful about that. Yeah, and then we have chapters that are just like there, without anything. There's that chapter, is it called The Death of Arden? Something like that. There's so many, paragraphs or pages on. There's like 2 chapters you can just completely drop. The one is about about Avienda from her point of view, while she's still being humiliated, trying to figure out what she did wrong, and being punished and humiliated. And I'm like, yeah. But there's very little information like actually driving the plot. It's just like an entire chapter about that. And yes, then one of those guys, one of the watchmen, like the soldiers on watch, bursts into flames and melts like half of the building. I'm like, yeah. But did that actually advance the plot? Not at all. Avienda was punished before, we knew that. We have had the scene in Knife of Dreams where the soldier starts puking beetles and stuff and dying. We've had just 1 or 2 chapters ago the scene where the White Tower was played as a Jenga tower and stone was dripping and melting. We've known about the whole idea of the bubbles of evil bursting and random bad shit happening to people. We've known that before. So there's like nothing in that scene that would actually be necessary. You could just like cut out that entire thing. Unless you feel you have to drive home Avienda's trouble one more time. And we had all of her thoughts, right? That she needs to get her honor back so she can finally, go back to Rand and feel that she's doing it for herself and all of that. We've had her those entire thoughts before in the last one when she was walking with the wise ones and whatnot. I keep forgetting which chapter that was, like chapter 8 or 7 or something like that, right? We had that, all of that was already there. It just gets repeated in a different situation, and we get a bit of firework, because we said like a building on fire, to distract the reader from the fact that nothing new happened here. And then there's the chapter called Questions of Control. You can drop the entire chapter and not lose anything, because all it is about is literally Cadsuane sitting there and finally figuring out how to maybe break Semirog. And how do you do that? Well, by humiliation. And this is an interesting aspect, because what we finally see is, because this is Brandon Sanderson, spelling it out explicitly. Like, we have all this spanking, and we obviously get like another spanking scene in this one here as well, because Semirog gets spanked. And like, we've had all of that like humiliation of women before in all of these books, from, you know, having Amathera stripped naked and forced to sing terrible, you know, pornographic songs, to it's all about humiliation of women. It's not so much about the physical pain of something, it's all about the humiliation. And we all knew that, and Cadsuane is finally figuring out that that's her way to break Semirog, and she does that by forcing her by spanking her until she eats beans from the floor. And that's all the information we get out of there. That, you know, Cadsuane figured out how to break, or maybe break, Semirog. Is that worth an entire chapter? Because the other bit is Perrin wandering around, figuring out that he has to meet Rand for the final battle, and has all these, you know, responsibilities with all those refugees. But that's exactly the same thing we already got before in the chapter when he was looking at, like, wagons. The departure, that's chapter 8, departure from Marl? I think that's the place. You know, Marland, whatever. That place, right? That's exactly a repetition of the exact same information. We're now in a different setting because he's wandering around, but that's all there is to it. And you could cut out all of that and, like, maybe drop that stuff once, be done. Lose another, like, 150 pages. Wouldn't that be great? Well, 100 pages maybe. Wouldn't that be great? So yeah, the claim that this tale needs 3 volumes to finish and not just 1 is largely due to Brandon Sanderson's way of writing, and not due to, like, so much stuff that still needs to be told. And that's like part of the real problem. It's like, it's super easy to read these books, and this is why someone like Brandon Sanderson gets away with writing like 1,500-page books, 50-hour audiobooks, because there's not much happening in that stuff. We just get the things repeated again and again, and he's very good at, you know, dropping. He's very good at dropping, you know, a little bit of excitement somewhere, so we're like, wow, something happened. It's like, no, nothing happened. A building burnt down. Whatever. But yeah, let's look at some of the, like, actual events and where those are going and whether that makes sense or not. Most of the actual events that are interesting, apart from, you know, we're learning that Moradin and Rand are connected to each other, but we already knew that before as well. Yes, it's spelled out now. But we knew that the Nameless and the Dragon Reborn have to fight each other, so there's some, like, deeper connection there. We knew all of that. We also now get, like, an official announcement that Moradin is Ishamael. Yeah, we already knew that as well. Yeah, Rand now knows as well. Good. Good for him. But yeah, that's all there is in like the Rand chapters. Yes, he suffers. He's not very happy. He sends Etiralda to the north, to the borderlands, because I guess the borderland armies that we've met before are led by Demandred. Possibly, maybe, who knows. So he sends Etiralda with all his people out there. Nice touch there to actually connect it back to Tom Merrilin. I thought that was actually pretty neatly done by Brandon Sanderson. He's good at these kind of tricks. He's really good at that, right? So we have like Ichirala's like, oh shit, how can I get out of there? So we lay it out with a memory of like the juggling balls, and it is very clear that the juggler he remembers is Tom Merrilin and Camelin, which, nice touch. It gives that illusion that there is an actual world behind it, and that was really well done. See, I'm able to, be nice to Brandon Sanderson. And then Rand just walks up, pulls his Taviran trick, and is like, yeah, all right, I'll do the thing that you just talked about, which is, with a flash of magic, or in this case, Illuminator's trick, or whatever, I'll just drop you somewhere, and as soon as people start looking again, you're gone, which is what he does, and he just teleports the army into the Borderlands, where we'll see them, presumably in the next book, meet with Lan, I guess? Just predictions here, right? Yeah, about the humiliation part. Yeah, it's all about humiliation. And there's weird ideas of honor floating around here, but the whole honor, dignity, cowardice, whatever concepts of honor and cowardice in fantasy are something that we really, really need to examine at some point. Yeah, not now. Let's look at the other side, the White Tower stuff, right? Egwene does her thing, and we have the same thing going down here again, right? So Egwene walks around, talks to different sisters, everyone starts to build respect for her, treat her more like an Aes Sedai and not like... But that's something we've had more than enough information about already. We've had her, like, building rapport with the Mistress of Novices. We've had her talking to other people. There's one actual nugget of information in the actual entirety of these chapters that we read today that actually drive the plot forward. Well, not even that. Well, and that's like she manages to find out that there are sisters hunting the Black Ajah within the tower. That's the only actual information that we get that is new. Everything else is just repeating stuff that we've had before. And yeah, as I said, it's easy to read because it flows by and there's like treacherously streamlined prose, and yeah, whatever. The rest is just the same things, just, explained more directly again and again. An interesting aspect is Elida losing her patience with Egwene near the end, and whipping her with magic and hurting her with magic a lot. And this, I feel, is edging very, very close to a problem there. Because we know you can't use the power as a weapon unless you are threatened. Now, is what Elida is doing still punishing or not? And does it change when Egwene, as we learn in this chapter, loses a lot of blood because she's actually bleeding? She's not being spanked anymore. She actually loses a significant amount of blood through the punishment, the things that Elida does to her with magic. And should Elida be able to do that? Because I am very sure that Elida is not Black Ajah. So she has her vows on the oath rod, and she still does that. She should not be able to do that. Just saying, in his attempt to over-dramatize the thing, the situation, he might have gone a bit too far for comfort there, our good Brandon Sanderson, whom I still look for a really stupid name to call him. We'll see. So yeah, but literally the only real information is the fact that, yes, there are people in the tower hunting the Black Ajah. And that's it. Wonderful. We've learned so much. And that took us like 2 full chapters in this book already. Each of them as audiobook like over an hour long. So that's like 50, 60 pages for one bit of information. I'm not sure if that's worth it, but it once again, it points to what I perceive going on here. This book is in actual pace much slower than what people call the slog. It just pretends to have more shit happening by throwing absolutely unnecessary bits and pieces at us, and that's all of it. Yeah, well, whatever. What else do we learn? Gawain Drakand is making up his mind because he finally learns that Egwene is actually now the other Amelin of the rebels, and she is in the White Tower now as a prisoner, and he's like, I've got to do something. So he rides off alone. He'll probably rendezvous with our good buddy Gareth Bryn, and they'll cook up some plan together with, what's her name? Swan Sanche. Possibly. Before that, we get like a long Gawain scene showing off how badass as a fighter Gawain is, and how arrogant Catherine Alrudden, whom we know to be Black Aja, is. So no really new information there either. And I feel like Gawain is one of the most useless characters so far, because we only get him when he's like, I don't know what to do, and that's it. There's like no agency there whatsoever. Maybe that will change now, but I have my doubts. We will see. What else? Yeah, Swan Sanche is trying her Swan Sanche things. We see more of the power play within the camp with Lilane trying to, sow more chaos. We have our wise old woman showing up and giving information out of nowhere because we need that kind of thing going. And that's all there is to it, really. It's, as I said, not much happens there. We spend like way too much time like with nothing. Literally nothing, really. Which is interesting because it still feels, when you're reading it, you're not paying attention, it feels like there's a lot going down. There's like all this action and all. No, there's not. It's a neat trick, is what it is. So let's look at the last chapter here, chapter 19, the Gambit, which is from the perspective of Tuon, who is planning a raid on the White Tower, which we knew would come because obviously Egwene dreamed of it, and her dreams come true. And she learns about, what are they called? The Trollocs showing up, and finally our superstitious Shanchan realized that Trollocs are real, while still believing in all these omens, which, we've spoken about that, so I don't feel I have to repeat all of it again. There is all this Orientalism going down, and Brandon Sanderson can't change it because it's the world that Robert Jordan built there. Not that I know if he would consciously want to change it, I don't know, but he certainly doesn't. So yeah, that bit is like, the scene is sort of well crafted. We still need to look at, Shanchan policy at a later date, and like what they're actually trying to achieve. But it's all good. She agrees to meet with Rand. She decides to wait a bit with the attack on the White Tower, but it's out there and they realize Trollocs are there. Beslin is confirmed as king of Abu Dar and decides to actually be king under the Shanchan protection, because what the Shanchan bring is democracy to all these wild countries, and all they want is your oil? I don't know. We'll have to find out at a future date. That chapter, however, was actually well crafted and had a decent amount of actually, plot relevant things going on. I just still dislike the whole way the Shanchan are described and all that background, but that's not something I can fault Brandon Sanderson for. So there we are. Very little has changed since yesterday. Very little has happened. It's extremely easy to read. Nothing really happens. The prose has simplified even more by being just descriptive and serviceable and nothing more. And we face the trick, the fact that, Brandon Sanderson is able to create an illusion of urgency without actually doing anything about it. that's where I'm at now. I'll be further on tomorrow, and we'll see how that feels. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you tomorrow. Cheers.